So we're saying that we are having some.
The back of the head, the computers are saying, are you speaking to the group? Yeah. Test it out. Maybe the.
Yeah, we're gonna start in just a few minutes. Or 1 minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I'm speaking right now, you'll see where the camera is shooting. Let's see if they can hear me. The cameras are around the room, and this is what it looks like right now, if you want to look.
Right.
So if you're okay with this direction, is that okay? All right. Okay, but call me if you need me.
Okay, thanks.
If you could, only need.
Hello, everyone joining on Zoom.
Okay.
The contents of the.
Making sure that audio is working for the participants on Zoom.
We're just getting our participants on Zoom to join in. And then we'll be ready to start.
Some chapters have.
Are you,
Chapters have, we have this resolution.
you're not on.
Yeah.
I talked this all the treaty.
And doing, I want to talk to you. Got an issue.
Policy or future.
Okay.
What about?
Yes, sir. I will have a copy of that.
So you just have to speak up, I guess.
Welcome, everybody. I would like to pass around a sign-in sheet if you haven't signed in already. And also perfectly optional name tags if you want, just to help us, you know.
I went this way.
I'll keep sending it around again.
Send it around. Thank you.
Just a housekeeping note, if someone is in this room and also on the Zoom, please leave your audio or leave the Zoom. It's being recorded. There'll be feedback. Thank you.
So my name is Vicki Elson with the Warheads to Windmills Coalition, which is a coalition so far of 70 organizations across the United States. And we work very hard to work on not only abolishing nuclear weapons, but also converting the wasted resources to real climate solutions and other pressing human needs. So we have several things that we do. We pressure the profiteers, which is hugely important because they own Congress. So we went to the Deterrence Summit. We visit them with a little notice that they're breaking international law. We help students choose jobs of life rather than jobs of death in the nuclear industry. And this is one of a few books that we are putting out. There's a new one coming out soon called, have you read Nuclear War, a Scenario by Annie Patterson? Jacobson? There's a new book coming out. This is the author here. It's called Nuclear Abolition, a Scenario. So stay tuned for that. So our vision is to take the resources that are wasted on nuclear weapons. This is prehistoric PowerPoint. the resources, the brain power, the money, the infrastructure, and for heaven's sake, the international goodwill that nuclear weapons mess up, okay? And to put those into climate solutions and other pressing needs. So we call that feeding two birds with one scone. And they are not just any jobs. These are jobs of nuclear weapons, death and destruction in the United States. And if we were to take those same resources and convert them to green technologies, we'd have a lot more jobs and they'd be a lot more fun, a lot more rewarding. So there is a wonderful thing. There is a bill in Congress. And this is Eleanor Holmes Norton, who you'll be hearing from shortly, holding up the last iteration of the bill. She's been putting in similar bills since 1992 to abolish nuclear weapons. And this is Beatrice Finn with the Nobel Peace Prize, for those of you who are ICANN people. And we have some support in Congress, not enough. There's Representative Jim McGovern, who you'll also be hearing from. And so we are really encouraging everybody to talk to their members of Congress and get more sponsorship for the Norton bill. It is not something that we expect to pass anytime soon, but it's a terrific campaigning tool. And we really want to get people thinking about nuclear weapons in a different way. We don't have to live this way anymore. We can change the discussion. We don't have to have them. We could really pull together as a planet and solve our shared crises. And that is our vision. It's really important for people to hear from their own constituents, for members of Congress. And by the way, if you're wondering if we have approached our new president, we have. We said, you've said we can't use these things. Why do we have them? And you've said you want to win the Nobel Peace Prize. So we had 140 organizations sign a letter that we delivered to the White House saying, you could win the Nobel Peace Prize. You could sign the TPNW and get things rolling. And the day after we delivered that to Congress, he started talking about denuclearization. Who knows? But we thought that was nice. So I would like to turn it over to Dr. Timon Wallace. Thank you, Tim.
Okay, thank you, Vicki. And thanks everybody for being here. We've got people online. I don't know how many.
20.
20-ish. We were hoping to have members of Congress here in the room at the TPNW meeting. Last year, many of you who are here know we had our representative from Massachusetts, Jim McGovern, as well as one of our state representatives from Massachusetts. First time we had any representation from US elected representatives to the TPNW. We were very excited about that. We can't get them here this week because the Congress is in session. And as you probably know, things are pretty crazy right now in Washington. And every Democrat is required to be ready for a vote because the Republicans only have a majority of 2. So they need everybody there ready to be in Congress. So we couldn't get them. We tried to get them to speak as they did 2 years ago in front of the steps of the Capitol building. We had a press conference. We had five members of Congress, and Vicki was there organizing that. We live streamed that to the Vienna 1 MSP. So we were hoping to do that as a fallback, and they couldn't organize that either because of all the timetabling issues. So we've got some videos from members of Congress, but welcome. But Eleanor Holmes Norton is launching her bill today as we speak, the Nuclear Weapons Abolition and Conversion Act of 2025. So that's our reason for being here. We were supposed to have press advisories about that too, but we haven't got that yet. So before we watch them on the screen, I just wanted to give a little introduction to the Norton bill for those of you who aren't so familiar with it. I don't know how many people here know all about the Norton bill already. Half. Okay, so anyway, As Vicky said, and as Eleanor Holmes Norton herself will say in a moment, she's been putting this bill in for over 30 years now. And since 2017, it has referenced the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And so this is our bill. You want to pass out the copies of the?
Well,
We've got, it's a very short bill. It's got 4 parts to it. First part is to direct the United States to sign the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which we don't expect to happen right away. I mean, there's the Trump card. We don't know what that's going to look like, but we don't expect it to happen right away. But the second part, so this is just to sign the treaty. And it's really, really important for our lobbying in Congress to be able to explain to members of Congress the difference between signing a treaty and ratifying it. And for those of you who aren't so familiar with that, the United States has signed a number of treaties that they still haven't ratified, centuries later. So there is a gap between signing and ratifying. The treaty does not enter into effect until it's been ratified. So by signing, the US is not committing themselves to anything legally or morally or anything else except to the goal of the TPNW, which is to eliminate all nuclear weapons from all countries. So it's very, very important that we have this distinction, and it's in her bill. Sign the treaty, number 1. Number 2, work with the other nuclear armed nations. Now that may involve negotiations. It could involve another treaty, which some people in the US are promoting, but it's probably unlikely that there will be another treaty at this point. We have a treaty, calls for the elimination of nuclear weapons, and it provides pathway for them to do so, but they will need to get the other nuclear armed countries on board before the US is likely to ratify it. Because once they ratify it, then they are obligated to come up with a plan for how they're going to remove and eliminate the nuclear weapons in the United States. So step 1 is to sign the treaty. Step 2 is to invite the other countries, Russia, China, North Korea, and so on, to sign the treaty as well. And we have good reasons to believe that if the US started this process within the nuclear armed countries, that other countries would join, but there's no guarantee. So there's could be a lot of work to do there. The third step is then, once that's clearly underway, that the other countries are going to be part of this, then ratify the treaty and come up with a plan for how they're all going to remove and eliminate nuclear weapons. And then the fourth point, which is very important for us as the warheads to windmills, is to then take all those enormous amount of resources, both money, trillions, literally trillions of dollars that are earmarked for nuclear weapons over the next 30 years, and all the brain power and infrastructure and resources that are going into nuclear weapons, and put that into climate especially, but also into other real needs that we have that are not being addressed because we're putting all this money and resources into nuclear weapons. So that's the Norton bill. It's our warheads to windmills bill, and it's being launched today. We're very excited about that. And we don't have any illusions that it's going to get passed, especially not in this Congress with the Republicans in charge. We have, as Vicky said, a small number of Democrats who support this bill, but it's a tool for us to use to rally people around supporting the elimination of nuclear weapons and the TPNW in particular. And there are many, many other bills out there. I mean, there's bills and resolutions that relate to nuclear weapons in both the House and in the Senate. There's the Back from the Brink resolution, which Jim McGovern will be also relaunching shortly at some point. We don't know when, and we don't know what the text is going to say, but we can talk about that. But there are also other bills. There's numerous bills that are put in the Senate, mostly by Ed Markey, Senator Markey from Massachusetts. But a number of other members of Congress have got bills talking about the Sentinel ICBM program, talking about the cutting the budget, military budget or the nuclear weapons budget, no first use policy of the United States. All these other bills are out there. But I want to just finish by reminding everybody here about 2 crucial points that have come up during this week in the TPNW, in relation to the TPNW. And that is The first one, I don't know how many of you were there. I think it was Monday morning, there was the session about deterrence and the legality of threats to use nuclear weapons when in almost every case, it's already illegal under international law to use a nuclear weapon on civilians, on a city. It's illegal. And it has been, and it was even when they used it on Hiroshima. So the crucial point there is that deterrence is a form of threat to commit mass murder, and committing mass murder is illegal already. So we are particularly sensitive to bills that are in Congress that either tacitly or explicitly condone deterrence. We don't want to be condoning the concept of deterrence in any way, form, or shape. And there are bills in the Congress right now that talk about reducing our stockpile to the level needed for deterrence. And there are bills that say we don't need this many weapons because we've got enough for deterrence. And we don't want to support those or encourage those because that's about giving legitimacy to the whole idea of deterrence, which we do not accept as ICANN. And the second thing that's also come up in this meeting, which is directly related, is about the assistance clause, which is, for those of you who know your treaty, it's Article 1E of the TPNW. It says it is prohibited to states parties to be involved in any form of to assist, encourage, or induce anyone to have anything to do with any of the prohibitions of the treaty. And again, when it comes to deterrence, we don't want to be assisting, encouraging, or inducing anybody in Congress to think that deterrence is okay. And that's why we want to really be aware of the language and the wording that goes into these bills. That's why we are sticking, for our part, to the Norton bill. It says very cleanly and clearly, sign the TPNW. It doesn't say, we want to keep the minimum number so that we can keep on having deterrence. So that's my introduction. You all got the copy of the bill. If anybody didn't get one, there's probably more around.
Can you raise your hand if you need a copy of the bill?
Did a couple of people, I
Okay,
think,
great.
that came in.
Also on the back of the bill, there's a fact sheet. And we also have a sheet on why the US should sign the nuclear ban treaty. Shall I pass those around too?
Sure.
I'm gonna let Judith do that. She's good at that. And also there's a sign-in sheet going around. If it hasn't gotten to you, please raise your, we could just send it all the way around. Yeah. That's okay.
The one that I brought before, I was just about the breakfast, so when it came to me. Yeah, that was the Lord.
So we're gonna show some videos now from Congress, and then we have a panel which includes a couple of people here in the room and a couple of people online, and then we'll open it up for discussion. But we want to talk about, how we go forward with the tools that we have, in particular the TPNW, and how do we build support for that in Congress in the United States. So if you all want to listen up, we'll have the first presentation from Eleanor Holmes Norton, who is the Congresswoman from Washington, D.C. She can put a bill into Congress, but she can't even vote on her own bill because Washington, D.C. doesn't have the rights to vote in Congress.
And just to note, she speaks very quietly. She speaks very gently, so the volume is up as loud as it can go, but right.
Today, I introduce the Nuclear Weapons Abolition and Conversion Act of 2025. This bill would require the United States, beginning with the date that the President certifies to Congress that all countries possessing nuclear weapons have begun the verifiable and irreversible elimination of such weapons under the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons Treaty to redirect resources that are being used for nuclear weapons programs to be used for addressing the climate crisis and human and infrastructure needs, such as housing, healthcare, and restoring the environment. In 1993, District of Columbia peace activists were successful in getting a ballot initiative in DC passed that called for nuclear disarmament. Since then, I have introduced a bill each Congress based on that initiative, including this bill, the 17th I have introduced. In March 2019, the DC Council passed a sense of the council resolution urging the United States to approve the treaty. These actions show that DC residents were early, prescient leaders on this important issue. Thankfully, the rest of the world is beginning to catch up to DC. As the only nation that has used nuclear weapons in war, and one that still possesses one of the largest nuclear weapons arsenals, this bill would help the United States reestablish its moral leadership in the world. I understand that a group of people are listening right now from the United Nations in New York, where the third meeting of state parties to the nuclear ban treaty is occurring. To everyone who is in New York right now, thank you for your efforts to create a world without nuclear weapons. Even if our current majority party opposes it, the people of the District of Columbia are with you. Thank you.
Hi everyone, this is Congressman Jim McGovern from Massachusetts. It is an honor to join you as we work toward a world free from the threat of nuclear weapons. Last year, I had the good fortune to be able to attend the second meeting of states parties to the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons at the UN in New York. I met hundreds of immensely dedicated campaigners from all over the world who are working to rid this world of this existential threat of nuclear war that is hanging over our heads. I met with the mayors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the only two cities that have actually experienced what a nuclear weapon does to an entire city and to the people in it. And I met other elected representatives from countries like Canada, Germany, Italy, Australia, Belgium, all pushing their countries to join this treaty as well. So I want to personally send greetings to all of you who are back in New York right now for the third meeting of this important treaty. And I'm sorry that I can't be with you. Things are a bit crazy down here in Washington, D.C., in case you haven't noticed. But I'm very excited to hear that today, as we speak, Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton is filing the Nuclear Weapons Abolition and Conversion Act of 2025, which calls on the U.S. to sign the TPNW to work with the other nuclear-armed nations to eliminate all nuclear weapons and to put all those wasted human and financial resources to work addressing the climate crisis and other pressing human needs. And you can rest assured her bill has my full support. And I want you to know that while the current majority in Congress might not care about abolishing nuclear weapons, those of us who do care about this issue want to be on the record as supporting you and your colleagues all around the world. The United States must change course. And this month, I will again introduce legislation to limit nuclear weapons, prevent their first use, and push my government to embrace the elimination of nuclear weapons, because we must stand up to those who believe more bombs make us safer. They do not. Please know that I will keep fighting to convince more of my colleagues in the United States Congress to support this treaty and the movement to abolish nuclear weapons. This treaty represents hope. but we need action. And I urge all nations, including my own, to join it. Because the choice is simple. Either we get rid of nuclear weapons, or they will get rid of us. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Chellie Pingree. I want to thank Congresswoman Norton for introducing her nuclear abolition and conversion bill again to Congress today, and I am so happy to support it. Many of my colleagues in Congress still have not even heard of the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, so it's important that this bill is before them. We in the United States need to be mindful of the commitment our government made when signing the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty more than 50 years ago to negotiate in good faith and at an early date an end to the nuclear arms race leading to nuclear disarmament. The complete elimination of our nuclear weapons must be our shared goal. And to that end, a very good first step, as proposed in the Norton bill before us today, is for the U.S. to sign the TPNW and to work with the other nuclear-armed nations to ensure that all 9 of those countries eliminate their nuclear arsenals. Today, there are close to 13,000 nuclear weapons across the globe, a figure that continues to rise at an alarming rate because the world is churning away from nuclear non-proliferation treaties. 9 countries currently own nuclear weapons, while 6 others have them stored within their borders. And while many of these countries are historically rational actors within the international community, countries that see nuclear weapons as the ultimate deterrent, the ever-changing state of the world today demands that we not remain complacent. Not all nuclear states are rational actors, and there is no guarantee that rational nuclear states will always remain rational. The world today is far different from what it was at the end of World War II, yet our policy towards nuclear weapons has not fundamentally changed. Now more than ever, we must pursue nuclear disarmament. Rather than bringing the world closer to disaster, let us prioritize disarmament diplomacy and make real progress to creating a safer, better world for our children, our grandchildren, and all generations to come. I want to thank Congresswoman Norton again for her bill, and I want to thank all of you watching this from the 3rd meeting of the TPNW taking place at the UN this week. Your work is vitally important to all of us. We need to eliminate nuclear weapons before they eliminate us. But we also need all those human and financial resources being wasted on nuclear weapons to instead be developing the green technologies we need to survive and thrive on this planet. Thank you.
Okay. So we have Archbishop Wester with us this morning. Thank you.
Welcome.
And John Ruhr, who's also been involved in a lot of the lobbying. We've got David Gibson online. We were expecting Ellen Thomas, who was one of the originators of the Norton Bill back in the 1990s. I don't know what's happened to her, but we'd love to just hear a few words from each of you and then have a discussion about how we promote this bill, how we build support for the TPNW, how we go forward in the present political climate.
Archbishop Wester?
Thank you very much. And thank you for this opportunity. I'm very grateful to be here today. My name is John Wester. I'm the Catholic Archbishop of Santa Fe, New Mexico. And obviously, I have to let you know that especially after the movie Oppenheimer, raised an awareness of the geographically of the place that New Mexico has in nuclear arms development. So I feel that it's very important for us to have a place at the table at this critical weapons abolition. Even now, as you know, the Los Alamos National Laboratories is developing new pit cores. And these are it's a new design nuclear weapons. It really signals nuclear weapons forever, was what it means, which is doubling down on the nuclear arms race. And the second nuclear arms race, which is more dangerous than the first because of AI and hypersonic delivery systems, et cetera. So even though we're very much engaged in this work of nuclear disarmament, as we speak, the last I checked, the budget for Lanel, which is just very close to my cathedral, it was greater than the whole budget for the state of New Mexico fiscal year. That's the Department of Energy. Department of Energy budget, excuse me. So, so this is frustrating, as we all experience. It's a very difficult challenge. One way that we're addressing the challenge is that we've formed a coalition, you have heard of it, a partnership for a world without nuclear weapons. And the coalition is between the Seattle Archdiocese, my Archdiocese of Santa Fe, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki. So we'll be going to Japan again. This will be our third time for the 80th commemoration. Bishop Shirahama in Hiroshima, and Archbishop Nakamura, and Archbishop Takami in Nagasaki, and Archbishop Etche and I will be going. Cardinals Supich and Cardinal McElroy are joining us. Cardinal McElroy will be installed this coming Tuesday in Washington, D.C., and Cardinal Supich is from Chicago. And so we'll be speaking out very strongly, hoping, making one of our main asks or goals is that we see some kind of traction with the TPNW as a sign on this 80th anniversary that our leaders are taking it seriously. So I'm certainly very eager. I've spoken with Congressman McGovern twice already by telephone. I'm eager to see what advice they could give me, help, support, to get our New Mexico delegation and the U.S. Congress to be on board, which they're not right now. So any help I could get, I'd love to have it. I'm very encouraged by, yesterday we went to the mayors, the cities against nuclear weapons. I was very inspired by them and the mayors that spoke and the alderwoman. And I think that's, I'm going to go back from this week also trying to get our mayors in Santa Fe and Albuquerque, because we have Sandia Labs in Albuquerque and Los Alamos and Santa Fe, to see if these two mayors can also become part of the Council of Mayors Against Nuclear Weapons. It's going to be a tough sell, I suppose, because of those laboratories that are there. But well, why back down from the challenge, right? So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Archbishop. John Rohr?
Yeah, let me build on something that the bishop said. Hear over and over again that these weapons production, all military, but nuclear weapons included, create jobs, and we need those jobs. You're in place more than any. And this is a fallacy. There is tremendous economic data that shows every $1 billion spent on military spending, and especially high-tech military stuff, costs jobs. In other words, every $1 billion spent in the military generates about 10,000 jobs. And if that money is spent on anything else, healthcare, teaching, education, or most other industries, you create anywhere from 10 to 15,000 more jobs. So I encourage everybody here, when anybody says this is a jobs program, no, this is a jobs killer. And that message is not getting out enough. And it's an additional piece that we can push. And the data is really irrefutable about that. The second thing is I lobby downtown, and I'm happy to see now, I see 15 sponsors on Eleanor Holmes Norton bill. She introduced this thing for 20 years when it had 1 or 2 co-sponsors. Some years, no co-sponsors. We've got 15 now. Reminds me a little bit of William Wilberforce, right, in the anti-slavery movement in Britain. Poor guy introduces an anti-slavery bill for 30 years in a row, gets almost no support. And then in the last couple of years, it tumbles and passes. So I think we need to think hard in that we are making progress and not to give up. The third point, I think, is been around DC now, in and out, especially with really active groups like Code Pink, and have learned from many, many staffers in the offices that 10 letters from one of us is nothing compared to 10 different letters from 10 different people. And I wonder if he should maybe put a little less effort into lobbying Congress and a little more effort into lobbying our friends, our churches, our families, so that instead of me sending 10 letters in a month, I convince 25 friends to send one letter. That we'd be more effective, so.
Yes, thank you. And again, they're hearing from their own constituents is what they really want. Although sometimes we bring constituents with us, so, and we represent, other places and people, but, and the whole coalition, but we got to have a constituent with us or they won't listen. Yes.
I wanted to respond to something that John said, and I don't dispute the fact that there's numerous economic studies that show that, for example, education and medical funding, et cetera, has a much higher economic multiplier than military research and development. But that's not the problem in New Mexico. And first of all, what the Archbishop was saying is that the Department of Energy spends more in the state of New Mexico than the entire state discretionary budget. So it's really extraordinary. And basically, New Mexico is a nuclear weapons colony. Sorry that I can't be real brief, but an anecdote. In 1992, I went down to see Senator Pete Domenici in his office. He was extremely powerful, Republican head of the Budget Committee. And he told me at the time, and I told him, I went down there to tell him I was suing the Los Alamos lab under the Clean Air Act, and his chief of staff jumped up and called me an environmental radical. And 5 years later, I went on to win the lawsuit. But anyway, Domenici volunteered to me that, first of all, he spent more than 50% of his time as a US Senator on DOE issues in the state of New Mexico, which immediately raised in my own mind, who do you represent, New Mexicans or DOE? And he told me that he took telephone calls by his bed from lab directors. They had direct access to him. The second point he made was his main priority as a US Senator was to get money to the Los Alamos and Sandia labs. And his third point was, and the way I do that is I'm sorry I'm taking so long. I agree. Numerous economic studies showing that non-military programs have far higher economic multipliers, beneficial multipliers. But that's not the problem in New Mexico. The problem is that New Mexico is a nuclear weapons colony. It is a politically weak state, except for nuclear weapons programs. And the New Mexican congressional delegation is all about the nuclear pork. So that's the scene in New Mexico, and how we break it. This actually, I've been an activist for 35 years, and I regard this as my single biggest problem is jobs, jobs, jobs. And I don't have a silver bullet for it. So, but if you do, and I wish I had an economist in my back pocket, I need one.
May I respond to that?
Yes, certainly.
Would you kindly introduce yourself as well?
Jay Coughlin
Oh, yes, of course.
with Nuclear Watch New Mexico.
But before we get into
Yeah, we have more people on
then we
our
can come
panel. So I understand that we've got David Gibson online, and we also have Ellen Thomas by audio only. So David, what would you like to share?
Well, first of all, you have David Gibson and Princess here. And she hates nuclear weapons. So one thing about this issue of job creation, one of the jobs that are created by the nuclear weapon spending are congressional jobs. So that's something to keep in mind. A lot of, I read somewhere that military contractors have, if you compare grassroots lobbyists to military contractor lobbyists, there's something to the effect of 100-1 in favor of military contractor lobbyists. So that's one of the hurdles we have to get over. There's a lot more of them on the Hill than there are of us. On the other hand, there's a lot more grassroots people on our side, and mobilizing them, of course, is the key. Now, I may say some things that may seem obvious or that you may already know, but I think it's important to keep in mind that when we're talking about lobbying, what we're really talking about is negotiations. We are in negotiations with people in power who have the ability to change the policies we want changed, and we need to make it to their advantage if we're going to get them to do what we want. The issue of sending letters and having communications with them that is not supported by constituents is very critical to all this. I'm going to tell you a quick story. When after the invasion of Ukraine, we met with our Senator Casey, who's no longer in office. We had 5 or 6 people representing a few different organizations. We had a really good conversation. They agreed with a lot of our points. And then at the end of the meeting, they said something to us that made me almost fall out of my chair. They said, we're happy we had this meeting with you because we never hear about these issues from any of our constituents. So that just shocked me. So the next meeting we had something like 10 or 15 people from different organizations, and we brought constituents into the room, and then we felt like we were getting somewhere. Unfortunately, he's no longer in office. We have to start all over with a new Republican senator, which brings me to my next point. And I think Tim had mentioned this before, don't expect to have a lot of legislative victories in the next 2 years. But keeping in mind that this is a negotiation that we're talking about, the lobbying still is very important because we need to build a case with each congressperson that we can reach, why it's to their advantage to support our issue, because the day will come when it will be to their advantage to support our issue. We are going to have to turn to other tactics, though. Things like being in the streets, things like massive letter writing and phone calls. Although letter writing, frankly, is not as useful as it used to be because letters don't reach Congress people. You have to send them to the local office. They oftentimes don't see them. Rule of thumb in lobbying, the closer you can get to the decision maker, the better. So phone calls are good. Get people the phone. Every time we set up a lobby visit, we always have people phoning from the district beforehand, so that when we walk in the room, we know that they've been hearing from people. That really matters. Also building coalitions. Again, this is probably obvious to you all, but we're working really hard to bring environmentalists into the room and healthcare people into the room because, these people, they expect this out of us, right? And so building those coalitions and finding ways to do that. And I heard it mentioned, I don't know if I heard it mentioned here or somewhere else in the past few days, but showing up to other people's things is real important if you want them to show up to yours. So if we really want Congress to sign on to a treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, we need to get people in other movements to support that. It's going to be a tough slog. It's going to be a lot of work. You have to keep going back. Once you have established the relationship, though, with the staff, you don't need to keep having the meetings with everybody in the room. You can represent them. We have a great relationship with senators' staff at Senator Fetterman's office. He's good on some issues. He's really bad on others. Not our favorite senator, to be honest, but we can get information to him through his staff because we have a great relationship with his staff, and it doesn't require us to have meetings all the time because we have 2 or 3 people that represent 44 other organizations. So they will respond to us and we have a dialogue. And then when it's time to bring in the numbers, we can rally people up real quickly. It's important to keep in touch with all your players, all your members, if you're going to be successful at lobbying. Again, a lot of this may seem obvious, but I kind of wanted to give you bigger picture. And I think the most important thing is remembering this is a negotiation. If there's something in it for them, they're more likely to support you. Morality is fine. Some Congress people will support you because of the moral issue, but not all of them will. And you have to go in there with that kind of hard-nosed attitude. So that's what I have for now.
Well, those were some really good strategic tips there, David. I really appreciate that. That is, after all, why we're here, to talk about strategizing how to move the needle. Do we have?
One more
did you have
point.
something else
One
to
more
say,
point.
David?
Yeah, one more point. Another real quick example. We beat the Reagan administration on their efforts to build up the 600 ship Navy fleet by going after home porting. They were going to put nuclear armed ships in bases all around the country. And the way we beat that was by showing its fiscal irresponsibility and its strategic irresponsibility. It was a bad strategy to spread the Navy fleet all around. They were doing this in order to win liberal votes on coastal cities. And so what we did was we went to the heartland of the country. We made a lot of friends in the Republican districts that weren't getting any of the money for any of these bases, right? And we did a GAO study. We asked the GAO to do a study about this, showed how it was fiscally irresponsible. And we got Barry Goldwater to be our spokesperson, and we beat the thing in committee. Strange bedfellows. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, David. Do we have
We have
Ellen
Ellen.
Thomas on audio? Ellen started the Prop 1 campaign and has been instrumental in Norton's work all these many years on these bills. And we are really delighted to have you with us here today, Ellen. Can't see you, but we'd love to hear from you.
She's trying.
She's trying. Okay, tell us how you got it done there, Ellen. Ellen is with the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, among other things. We'll just keep introducing her until she comes.
Okay, Ellen, do you want to maybe try and leave and come back, and maybe that will work? And in the meantime, we should go to a few questions that we got in the chat. Will you try and sort that out? So from Eileen Karkowski, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. She was saying that the screen froze while you were talking about what was going. Oh, here's Ellen.
Oh, there's Ellen.
Oh,
that's
sorry. Do you want to ask your question, Eileen?
Well, I'm also from Wilf, and I had noted and watched much of what Jim McGovern was saying in Congress, along with several others, about 2+ weeks ago. He had both Republican and Democratic representatives supporting getting rid of nukes. The ability of Wilf, which has Wilfers in at least 45 states, to contact representatives who are even on the other side of the aisle would be, if I knew their names, I could contact the people in the appropriate states to see if they are willing to write to their senators, whoever has spoken up, basically. That's one thing. I had a question that really bothered me, which was about Jay Cogna, pardon me the mispronunciations. He was talking about the man who is responsible more to the Los Alamos. He's supposed to get money for this continued research, and the screen just froze at a very important part, and I would love to know all that was said.
Well, it's on video, and you'll be able to catch up with it later on. I don't think everybody's screen froze at that moment, so we'll do our best. But in answer to your first question, luckily, there are all kinds of wonderful templates on the Warheads to Windmills website for writing to people, and we will be, through the coalition, we will be helping people understand how to do those campaigns. So just getting revved up. Stick around, and that will become apparent. Tim, do you want to say more about that? But the templates and everything on the website?
Well,
I think you covered it.
Yeah, okay. So do we have,
Ellen is back. I'm not sure if the audio is going to work.
let's try out.
Ellen?
okay, Ellen, are you here? David, can you tell us if your screen froze
I
when
think
Jay was
everyone's-
talking?
I think everyone's screen did.
It
It's all
did,
good?
yes.
Okay. Oh, it did? Okay. Well, if we don't have Ellen,
She posted her
You-
comments in the chat. She posted her comments in the chat just now. Ellen did.
All right, in Ellen's lieu, I'll read her comments in the chat.
okay, speak loud.
Okay. She's apologizing, obviously, for these technical difficulties, but we're making it work. What she just wanted to say is that she was part of the team that brought the voter initiative to Washington. She was part of the team that brought the voter initiative to Washington DC in 1993, which required the mayor to tell the delegate that the majority of voters in DC wanted her to introduce this legislation, which she did. And has done so in every session since 1994. And she's highly recommending using local voter initiatives as a tactic going forward.
Local voter initiatives, great, thank you. Jay, would you like to just tell us the name of the person who was giving more money to
This
the
was-
news than to the,
It was Republican Senator Pete Domenici, and at the time, he was chair of Senate Budget Committee, so he was extremely powerful.
okay, we can look up that history.
Yep.
Thank
That's,
you.
that's from about 20 years ago.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Okay, do we have,
No more on there, but let's open it up. to
all righty. More questions, please. Yes, Joanne.
I wonder, first I have a question. Is there the House bill number yet for?
Oh, good question.
Is there?
Nope, there's no number yet. She just introduced it.
know it, she just-
While we're talking, she's put it in, so we'll get the number tomorrow.
Okay,
Yeah.
because one thing that we could do, we're having this big conference in Seattle in April. And one thing we could do is for everyone who comes to the conference, we'll attach the bill. With the program. That makes sense, it seems. Okay, but I wanted to address Archbishop Lester. We know in spirit you'll be with us. We set the date for the conference so that the Archbishop could join us. And we haven't gotten the confirmation yet. I wonder if you could make a nice phone call to him. He's going to give the invocation, but we have him as a keynoter. And we don't have the answer yet. So, but I'll pass this around. It's going to be this week condensed into 2 days in Seattle. We have a spectrum of presenters from the Nobel Prize winners to the direct action people who, Kathy Kelly, to the physicians who were involved, to the downwinders and the Marshallese, to the Korean Bakusha, to authors of famous books. I think Tenen will be hopefully part of it, but we have other authors as well, like Ward Wilson will probably take part in it. So we would love to have you at least join us if you can't come to Seattle when I think the rain is going to stop.
Okay, Joanne, we're circulating the report. We've only got 5 minutes left to get everybody's questions about Congress. How are we gonna work on Congress? So please, Joanne, let's go back to that. If anybody has any. You're in charge.
Yes, you have a question about strategizing in Congress?
Well, it's indirectly about that. We want to get people to contact their senators and representatives. When I talk to people who are even in my political activism group, and I say, TPNW, huh? What? Then I say Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, huh? How do we educate people? How do we get people to know what we're talking about so that they join with us?
Okay, well, there are a lot of resources on the ICANN website, lots and lots. And there are resources on the Warheads to Windmills website.
Which I should know.
And Outrider Foundation has a lot of good stuff on their website. What are some other great resources for educating people? Anybody? That's a good start. Okay, more questions about strategizing in Congress? Yes?
Todd Sack with Physicians for Social Responsibility. When you say Congress, you really mean Republicans, don't you? Because that's where we need to change minds.
Yeah.
And if that's so, some of the strategies I'm hearing sound counterproductive. For example, to argue that we're going to spend billion on renewable energy instead of weapons, well, Republicans aren't interested in that. And it almost is counterproductive. I wonder if we should talk more about cutting the deficit and other arguments. These sound too progressive for the Congress
Let
people
Tim
we
answer
need to
that question.
persuade.
It's a good question.
David has a.
Okay, David, did you want to take that, David?
Yeah, I think we're at a space right now where, in terms of building a negotiation with these Republicans, they're not going to listen to us. I don't think there's anything we can put on the table in terms of facts and figures that are going to win them over. It needs to be a political cost for them. And that means shifting our tactics right now, as far as Republicans go, with being in the streets, bringing in these other people and these other constituencies and letting them see that they're not only mad about cuts to Medicaid, they're mad about seeing the world being blown up. You know, we need to reach our lobbying, really, as somebody else in the room said, needs to be with constituents right now and bringing those people out and putting the Republicans on the hot seat. That's where we're at. This Republican Party is not going to respond to rational arguments. Not right now. We need to give them, make it a political cost. We need to be meeting with the Democrats the way we normally do.
Yep, keep building the momentum. Mary, yes, please.
Just channeling Alice Slater just for a minute. Her point is that Democrats also are a target. I mean, we can't assume Democrats are going to go with us. We need to know our history, and Gorbachev offered to Reagan to eliminate nuclear weapons. That was Russia. So to the extent that Congress people say, well, the Russians will have it if we don't. Look at history. The Russians were willing to forego nuclear weapons. I think we need to learn our history and share that history because it's very powerful. It's the United States that was the obstacle. It's not the Russians.
You know,
Thank you.
Gorbachev was a special case, I think.
Well, I don't know.
John?
Yeah,
It was an
to
exception.
address, Jay, your thing about the jobs, 2 points. One is those studies of economics show that, to talk to Republicans who were loving the dismantling of government, that even not taxing people, that's a big thing in Republicans, not taxing people creates more jobs with that same $1 billion. That's a really important point. Leaving it in people's pockets causes them to spend money that creates industry and jobs. The second thing, when New Mexico is so only powerful in the nuclear realm, that's a weakness for your work in New Mexico, but it's a strength for everybody else. Just like David pointed out earlier, the Republicans in the heartland got angry that all the money was going to other people. And if it's disproportionately going to New Mexico, that's another reason to withdraw support from economic purely.
More questions on strategy?
Okay, if not, I'll just add one thing, which is also a plug for the next event, because it's already 2:30. But just to say, in regards to targeting Republicans and the strategy and so on, you know, what we have found and what was found in the 1980s, exactly the same, is that we are not going to make progress in Congress until we target the companies that are responsible for these weapons and that have such inordinate control over our members of Congress, like you were saying. I mean, these companies are making 1,000 or even 10,000% return on investment by spending millions on lobbying and re-election campaigns and so on, and then they get these gigantic contracts worth billions. I mean, there's literally trillions of dollars being earmarked for these companies to make nuclear weapons. It's a huge, lucrative industry, and they use that money, a small part of it, to make sure that gravy train keeps rolling. So we've got to put pressure on the companies, and we have tools for doing that. The TPNW is a hugely powerful tool that we have to help put pressure on the companies from around the world as well as from in the US. But we're going to have a side event tomorrow on these tools, on divestment, boycotts, stigmatizing the companies, trying to put pressure on them so that they are the ones that channel our need to get rid of nuclear weapons and start talking about saving their companies by moving away from nuclear weapons. So that's our strategy in the bigger picture, because, you know, getting members, Republicans in this Congress to think about anything is much more difficult. So I think we need to wrap up, I guess. But thank you all. Yeah, you got one final comment?
Yeah,
I don't like dealing in abstracts, and I play to win. I like to litigate for one thing, so I like achieving concrete things. All of this is a forward, because there is a critical abstract that I do think we need to deal with. And first of all, I don't think that economic arguments are going to win. For one thing, the whole thing is designed to enrich defense contractors. So that takes care of the money argument. With all due respect to the Archbishop, I don't think the moral argument's going to work either. In terms of prevailing, what we need to do is to puncture the very notion of deterrence, so-called deterrence, that since I was a kid, you know, that's the rationale I've been given. That's the pitch that you always hear is deterrence. We need to make the American public understand that instead of deterring threats, deterrence is the threat. And the first thing I would point to is the long history of accidents and near miscalculations. So that is easy for the public to grasp. What is not so easy for the public to grasp and is not known is the official policy of the United States government rejects minimal deterrence. And that was so stated by the Pentagon. That's in black and white. And they talk about the need to have counterforce capabilities, which is nuclear warfighting. And that leads to endless permutations of the stockpile, that leads to new designs, that leads to first strike capabilities. So to repeat, deterrence itself becomes the threat. And we're not ever going to win in a national security argument until we get that idea across.
And that is
Thank you.
ICANN's goal, the main goal as of last I heard, and it's one of ours too. So thank you very, very much for coming. If you didn't sign the sign-in sheet, we'd love to be able to keep in touch. And if you didn't get any of this stuff or you want to see any of this stuff, come and see me. Thank you so much, everybody. Peace and best wishes to you all.
Thank you.
Thanks for your terrific work.
Yeah.
Marvelous, marvelous. Thanks.
Somebody missing a badge, a very good badge.